The worst real estate advice is also the most popular. Hold forever. Real estate always goes up. Never sell at a loss. I've sold plenty of losing properties over my 23 years of real estate investing, and I generally know when to cut my losses. But there was one particular property where I fell right into the trap. And today I'm going to tell you the story of that property, plus 2 other stories, all where properties should have been sold at a loss. And along with these 3 stories, I'm going to give you some simple frameworks that'll help you decide if it's time for you to sell a property at a loss and move on. If we haven't met yet, my name is Chad Carson. You can also call me Coach Carson. And on this channel, I teach you how to use a small and mighty style of real estate investing to achieve financial freedom so you can spend your time doing more of what matters. So my story begins almost 20 years ago, back in 2007. And to give you some background, I began investing in real estate in 2003, right after I graduated from college. And so I was still a relatively new investor, but my business partner and I had had some success. That year in particular, 2007, we had 33 closings where we bought properties. And this was one of those 33 closings. And we were doing a lot. We were making a lot of offers, marketing a lot. I was doing this full time, essentially. And so I was pretty confident. I was also feeling very creative. I was doing a lot of creative deals. This deal in particular, I got into some seller financing. And the thing I didn't have, though, that we did not have, we were not great rental property operators at the time. So we didn't know all the details of what it meant to manage a rental property. So that's the background. And this particular property was what's called a mill hill house. So in the South Carolina and a lot of the South, there are these textile mills, old textile mills from the early 1900s, that they built a lot of factory houses around the factory. And eventually they went private and people owned the properties, but they're all built in the 1920s. And this house was about 1,000 square feet, 2-bedroom, 1 bath, built in 1925. And it had some work done to it, but it was not in good shape in terms of the bones of the property. And this is the first mistake I made was the house was, quote, almost rental ready. And a lot of people, and this is kind of a pet peeve of mine now, when they say, well, it's good enough for a rental property. And it's my pet peeve because it's not good enough for a rental property. Rental properties need to be fixed up as well. But we bought this property not counting on fixing up a lot of the old stuff. And so we bought the property for a good price of $45,000, or what we thought was a good price at the time, $45,000 for this house, plus a mobile home. So we had 2 separate rental properties kind of right down the street from one another. So the part of the property that we bought for this house was $30,000, $15,000 for the mobile home. So those are some numbers there. And one of the things that enticed us to do this deal was we had $1,000 down in seller financing for the balance of that. Our payment was only $250 per month with seller financing. Now, what I know now is that seller who was selling me the property was pretty burned out. He didn't want to own the property either. And we were taking this problem off his hands. So fast forward, we went through a roller coaster of cash flow for about 7 years. We'd have a person in the property, they would start renting it would start well, and then it would go badly, and they would move out, or we had an eviction or 2 that we had to do. And then every time it turned over, we had a lot of costs. So we'd have like positive $3,000 for a year, negative $8,000 for a year because of the turnover, because of the capital expenses we were spending money on, trees falling, things like that. And so by the end of 7 years, we decided we'd had enough of this property. We also had the challenge of this neighborhood was something we couldn't fix. Just 2 houses down, we had people sitting on the front porch dealing drugs. We had to drive by them to get to the property. And just like our tenants did, and just like people who were trying to look at the house had to drive by them. And it was kind of intimidating. And just wasn't anything we could do about that. There's several properties in the neighborhood that were right around us, kind of like that. So by that time in 2014, we decided to sell the property. We spent some money on it to fix it up. We put it on the market, and the house is the first one we put on the market. And we put it on the market for a price of $39,000. And then we waited, and nothing. We didn't get any takers on that. So we lowered the price to $30,000, and we finally got an offer from another investor at $22,000. And then later on, we put the mobile home on the market once our tenant moved out of there, and we ended up selling that one for $15,000. So let me add up the numbers for you. We got $22,000 from the investor, and then we got $15,000 from the mobile home. So we had $37,000 total from selling both properties, and that wasn't even enough to pay off the mortgage. Remember, we had bought the property for $45,000 with $1,000 down. So we had to come out of pocket to sell the property, and we had spent a lot of money on fixing up the property. But the worst part about this for me, in addition to all the lessons I've told you about it, was we could have realized this challenge, this problem a lot earlier, and we could have sold the property a lot earlier. But we had this attitude at the time that we can fix this, we can solve this problem, let's keep working at it, instead of just pulling the plug and moving on from the property. Now, after my story, you might be asking yourself a very good question. How do you actually decide when to sell? Like, when should you hold on and just keep working at it? And when should you pull the plug and go ahead and sell the property? And that brings me to story number 2. This is actually a real conversation I had about a month ago inside my rental property mastery community. I do coaching calls in there, and I'm going to call the person I talked to Mark to keep his details private. But before I tell you Mark's full story, I want to give a quick shout out to Steadily Landlord Insurance, who sponsored this episode. Now, this whole episode is about when it's okay to lose money by selling a rental property. That can sometimes be a smart move, but there's a much bigger kind of loss that could destroy everything you've built as a rental investor. And that's what happens when you don't have the right insurance. I'm talking about a tenant lawsuit that could wipe out your net worth, or a fire that your policy doesn't fully cover, or other kinds of liability claims that go way beyond what you thought you were protected for. And that's why I like and use Steadily Landlord Insurance. They were built by landlords who've seen these problems firsthand. They know the real risks we face, and they've designed coverages specifically to fit those situations. Check out what Steadily can do for your rental properties by going to coachcarson.com/Steadily. Now back to Mark's situation. He's facing a very similar situation that I had, but his numbers were a lot bigger. Now, Mark's story actually begins with a win. He had been working a full-time job, he and his wife, and they bought a property that they sold and did really well on. They made several $100,000s on a rental property, and they decided to do what's called a 1031 exchange, where you trade that equity into another property and you don't have to pay any taxes on it. And so those $300,000 in winnings went into a 5-unit building, and they bought it for $890,000. So I think they put $360,000 down and had about a $530,000 mortgage on the property. Now, this property looked good on the surface. The numbers penciled out pretty well, looked like it might be a cash flow property. And I would describe the neighborhood, or actually Mark described the neighborhood, sort of a C minus, maybe D plus. And the way I describe that kind of classification is when you're in a C minus neighborhood, it's mostly landlords. And I would say when you get into the D neighborhoods, that's mostly landlords who aren't really taking care of their properties. So because they don't take care of their properties, they tend to attract tenants who aren't going to be as good at tenants as well. This is very similar to my neighborhood, where people are dealing drugs and that type of thing. So Mark is dealing with something similar to me. And the other issue he's dealing with in his town is there has been an oversupply of Class A brand new construction rentals. So there's been a trickle-down effect where it's been an oversupply of rentals. There's plenty of places for tenants to choose. And so the better tenants are choosing the nicer places, or the places that have been fixed up. His place is in a neighborhood, in a little block in that neighborhood, that is not doing so well. In addition to that, because he had so many turnovers, similar to my property, he had a lot of costs. He probably estimated he'd have about 40% of his rent every month in operating expenses. That's like your taxes, your insurance, your maintenance, your capital expenses. I think it ended up being more like 55 to 60% of his rent went to operating costs. So this thing, between the rent going down, between his operating expenses going up, was bleeding him financially. He was losing money consistently by the time we had a conversation about it. And so the decision we were talking about, his conversation, was whether he should sell the property, because he had talked to a real estate broker who thought he had maybe 2 options to go with. Number one, he could sell the property to another commercial style investor, because this is a 5-unit building, which falls into commercial real estate anytime you're over 4 units, because there's different types of financing for those buildings. And the broker thought he could probably get $700,000 to $750,000 with that type of buyer. Or they had one other creative idea where they could actually combine 2 of the units, and then they could sell the property as a 4-unit residential building and maybe open up the buyer pool to more people. They thought maybe they could sell that property for $850,000, going that exit strategy. But in either case, after you net out his repair costs, his real estate commissions, and all of that, he probably would walk away cash with about $130,000 to $200,000 after selling it. If you remember, he started with over $300,000 from the prior win he had in that other property. And so this was the tough thing to swallow. Mark was having to decide, should I sell a property at a loss and walk away from a couple $100,000 from what he started with? And that feeling of loss, that disappointment, was really what was holding him back. But here's the feedback that I gave him. We discussed his options. We discussed the fact that he's out looking at other deals and finding other properties. And I gave him a quote from one of my favorite investors, Warren Buffett, who said, "You don't have to make your money back the same way you lost it." And I thought that was the essential point of Mark's story, because Mark had other opportunities out there. And what he was stuck on was thinking about the fact that that money went from $300,000 to $130,000 to $200,000. He's focusing on that loss, and he's wanting to stick with that property in order to make that money back. And we have all done that probably. We've all wanted to hold on to something. But the point that Warren Buffett makes is that if you can take that money and get it back, you don't have to make it back the same way you lost it. You don't have to use that same property to make it back. Like, what if Mark had another property over here that he could buy for $100,000 less than its full value? Like, he found a good deal that was worth $800,000 over here that he could buy for $700,000. Well, using that $130,000 to $200,000 to go buy that property will make the money back faster than it is keeping this property right here. And that is a key framework for all of us to think about. Every time you choose to keep a property, you are choosing to pass on what you could do with that money in another property. And that doesn't mean I don't like buying and holding properties. I love buy and hold rentals, but I like buying and holding rentals that have good potential in the future. If you find a neighborhood, a property where the potential is gone, where you wouldn't buy this property again, given what you know, then it might be a good time to sell that property and look for another. And that actually leads me to the third story. This is another coaching call I had inside of Rental Property Mastery. And by the way, I've had a lot of I need to sell a property and loss conversations. So I know there's probably a lot of you out there who've either had this happen in the past or you're facing the exact same situation. I'm going to change the name for privacy for this couple as well. I'm going to call them Blake and Lisa, but they owned a property long distance in Ohio. They lived in another state. And the bigger opportunity cost for them was not just that they could sell this property and buy a better deal, but they were actually, because this property was losing money for them, Blake was not leaving a job that he really wanted to leave. That part of their financial freedom plan was them both being entrepreneurs and not having to work at a W-2 job with a rigid schedule. And they weren't doing that because this property, this one property, was holding them back. So in their case, for Blake and Lisa, they bought a property that was, quote, turnkey, long distance, another small multifamily property. It ended up not being turnkey. The investors who had fixed it up before left some things that needed to be done. So they had some additional repairs they had to do. They also had some mismanagement. They hired a property manager who put some tenants in the property who didn't take care of it, who weren't paying their rent on time. And eventually, when they had to evict these tenants, they got really vindictive about that. They actually moved across the street to another property. They were shooting BB guns at windows and breaking windows. On their way out, they put glue in the toilets and did all sorts of other stuff to kind of sabotage the property. There's a lot more details. If you talk to them in person, you can learn all about the horror story details they had in this situation. But by the time I talked to them, they had realized these problems. They were trying to decide what to do next. And they had a couple different options. They're like, hey, maybe we could owner finance the property and get a little bit better price. Maybe we could do something like a lease option. And my feedback to them was, given everything they've talked about, given the fact that this property is holding them back from leaving a job and achieving some of their personal goals, was just to rip the Band-Aid off. Just to take action. Don't do something that's going to try to make a little bit more money just to kind of prolong this deal, is to move on from the deal. Not only because they can make more money on another deal, they're actually actively looking at other deals and buying other properties and doing a lot better. So this is the loser property compared to some of the other stuff they're doing, but also because of the energy and the time and the lifestyle shift that it would give them. This property was holding them back from getting permission to make that shift. So they ended up putting the property on the market quickly after that conversation. They did rip the Band-Aid off. They had some tough conversations with the property manager, and they have since sold the property really quickly and moved on from it. And they've redeployed the capital into something else. So now that you've heard all three stories, I want to take a step back and give you some feedback, give you some frameworks that might be helpful for you, either if you're dealing with a situation like this right now, or maybe in the future if you deal with this. If you're in the game of real estate investing, or really any investing, you're going to face problems on properties, investments that didn't turn out the way you thought. And the first lesson I want to give you, or the feedback that I have kind of absorbed, is that you're not a failure as an investor because you had a deal that lost money. In fact, you could be a successful investor by choosing to take your losses. There are many reasons it can be a good decision to do that. So don't beat yourself up too much. Make it a lesson. My business partner and I used to say that we had real world seminars every time we lost money on something. You can pay money for education, and we had the school of hard knocks. And you've probably done that as well. You've lost money on something, or you've lost time and effort or energy, or lost sleep because of something. Just call it the school of hard knocks. Make sure you learn a lesson from that. Write that down. That's one of the reasons I got into making YouTube videos and teaching, was I had a lot of mistakes. I had things I was doing wrong, And it was easier for me to teach other people so they could try to apply that to their lessons. That made me feel good as a teacher about some of the mistakes I've made. So if you're in that situation, don't beat yourself up too much about it. We all make mistakes. You're not the first one. The second recurring lesson that came through for me in these stories is understanding when you buy cheap properties that look good on paper is often a mirage. And I'm not saying buying older properties is not a good idea. I just made the mistake with my mill house, and I think the other two investors made the same mistake, is that when you buy cheaper properties that look cheap on the price on the front end, we're often not accounting for the real cost of that property. In particular, for mine, for example, the 1925 property, if I would have gutted it and just remodeled everything up front, I would have probably spent $30,000, $40,000 back in 2007. And I wouldn't have made as good of a return on investment. On paper that looks like, it's just kind of mediocre, but I wouldn't have dealt with a lot of the problems I had of having turnover in tenants. And so sometimes you need to bite the bullet and estimate doing the entire repairs up front, doing all the capital expenses up front. And if the deal doesn't work doing that, it's not a good deal. You need to buy it at a lower price. And in my case, the location itself didn't really warrant spending $30,000. Remember, I bought the whole thing for $45,000 and the house was for $30,000. He would have almost had to give me that property for it to make sense. And in many cases, that's true in really low price areas. You can't make money unless you can buy the whole block or buy a few properties together. You can't solve the problem in the neighborhood necessarily with one property. So you got to be really careful on those low end properties. And then I would say the third takeaway I want to give you is a framework for how to decide when to sell a property. And for me, I have 3 steps. Number 1 is, am I facing things with this property that I have no control over? So neighborhood and location and the neighbors and the guy sitting on the front porch, that's an example of something I have no direct control over. Even with me underestimating repairs, I have control over that. I could choose to spend money to fix up my own property. But if the neighborhood, if the location has challenges, you can't fix that necessarily. And that is a reason I would say, number 1, that you might want to consider selling something is if the reason this deal is bad is something you can't control, you might want to lean towards selling it. Reason number 2 you might want to sell on my checklist is ask yourself the question, would I buy this property again? Knowing what I know now about the neighborhood, about the property, about the numbers, would I buy it back? And you can actually do the math on this. You can run it. You can say, assume that I would sell this property. Like my mill house, I knew I could sell it for, in the end, $22,000. My question for myself is, would I buy that property back for the price that I can sell it for, or the net equity that I could take out of that property and do something else with it? So if you answer that question, no, I wouldn't buy this property back, that's a pretty good sign that you should sell the property, because it leads to number 3 on my checklist is ask yourself, is there something better that you could be doing with that money? So there's always this question of opportunity cost. And remember Warren Buffett's lesson where he said, you don't have to make your money back the same way you lost it. That's just another way of saying there's an opportunity cost. You could sell that property, you could take that money, you could take your time, you could take your energy, you could put it somewhere else. And so you should always be asking yourself the question, what else could I be investing in? If you're really good at finding deals and finding other rental properties that make good investment money, you could actually sometimes justify selling this property at a loss and then moving that money somewhere else. And if you don't have other places to put your money, if all you can do is put it in a CD in the bank, I would say watch more videos on how to buy good properties. The better you are at buying good deals in real estate investing and running the numbers and understanding how to negotiate those deals, the better it makes everything else in your business. That's one of the key skills you've got to learn as a real estate investor. So again, my checklist, number 1, do I have a property where I'm losing control, where there's things that are bad I can't control that might lead me to sell? Number 2, do the buy again test. Would I buy this property back again for the price or the amount of equity that I could pull out of it? And then number 3, what else could I do with my money? Is there an opportunity cost that I could do that would be even better than just keeping this property? I don't have to make my money back the same way I lost it. In some cases, it's just better to sell the property and move on. So this is one of those topics that I think will generate a lot of conversation. So I would love to hear from you in the comments. Let me know if you've ever dealt with a situation like this. How did you decide to sell a property or maybe to keep it? What was the logic that went through your head? Or if you have other advice for people, let us know in the comments. We'd really love to hear from you. And I also want to recommend my next episode or my next video, which is something we didn't talk about in this video, but it's very relevant, is that when you sell a rental property, sometimes you also have to deal with the taxes and the tax consequences. How much are you going to actually pay in taxes? Even if you lose money on a property, you might still have to pay taxes on depreciation recapture. So this is something you want to make sure you figure out how to calculate. And in my next episode, I actually have a spreadsheet you can get for free to help you figure that out. So if you're watching on YouTube, click on the thumbnail above me here. If you're listening on the podcast or watching on YouTube, you can also click on the link in the podcast or YouTube description below. Thank you so much for watching or listening. I'll see you in the next episode.